Okay, so forgive me if this is a little bit awkward. I put together in a haste. Over the last week, I had the opportunity to talk to a lot of you over the phone, by email, and in conversation at my mom's house. And a lot of you gave me very touching stories. Not only did you offer your condolences, you gave humorous stories about working with my dad, being friends with my dad, or how you first encountered him. I really appreciate that, and gave me a perspective. I knew my dad as a father. You knew him as a friend, as a mentor, as a teacher, or someone who helped you along in a different aspect. A little bit about my dad. He was born June 19th, 1931, the son of two Greek immigrants, Emmanuel and Albaneki Yanatsis, in Buffalo, New York. He is predeceased by his youngest brother, Dean, and is survived by his middle brother, James. I'm very grateful that my cousins were able to fly down here and attend the ceremony with us. Not only was Dean my dad's brother, the two guys taught together for a long time at the same public school. He was my dad's best friend. Before teaching, my dad worked at Bethlehem Steel in Lackawanna, New York. He attended night school at Buff State. He taught shop classes, chemistry, and physics at Seneca Vocational High School and at Erie Community College. He taught for 38 years until 1991. It was kind of ironic growing up. Two of my childhood friends, Bob Steck and Brian Sweck, actually, their fathers were students of my dad, and they used to tell me some stories. And that their parents grew up. Bob's dad worked at Chevy engine plant. Brian's dad worked at Ford. So it's kind of ironic that my friends' parents were my dad's students. One of the more interesting conversations I had was the alumni president. I called the alumni president blindly, and he talked my ear off for about 50 minutes, telling old stories. He told me a story about when students were going for job interviews. My dad would actually drive the student to the work site so that the student could have a job interview. They built a microwave antenna out of like a snow saucer, and they eavesdropped on a conversation between him and the principal, and they broadcast it around there. And the principal and my dad were outside, and they had the microwave antenna focused on them, and they had a playback for a response to the answer. And the principal and my dad looked up, and my dad got a little rasping from the principal. But this was before class even started. And so my dad had a static electricity machine, which you can see on the photos here. He made the students touch it, and they got a 10,000 volt shock for a little while. Now the students didn't get in trouble, though. They got extra credit for eavesdropping on the project. My dad was also a National Guardsman and in the 1950s, and a civil defense officer. He then became also vice president of the National Apartment Owners Association, the Western New York chapter. He met my mom in October 1969, and they married in 1970. My parents moved to Florida 11 years ago. My dad had 2 jobs his entire life. Sometimes he had 3. They moved to Florida to enjoy the beaches, sunsets, and play golf. Stuff that I never knew my father really did. As I mentioned earlier, my dad owned 2 apartment buildings. The buildings were not in a residential type neighborhood. So I'd follow my dad as he fixed plumbing fixtures, painted. He abused child labor laws. He made me carry a 5-gallon pail of tar up three stories and tar roofs and paint them with that reflective silver paint. We cut grass, and being in Buffalo, we shoveled snow, shoveled the parking lots and sidewalks, and started all over again. He continued that work ethic until today. I was talking to the president of the neighborhood association, Kenny, and Kenny said, I always thought he knew how my dad was feeling with his cancer if the garage door was up. If the garage door was up, my dad was doing pretty good and fooling around in the garage. If the garage door was shut, he was probably, resting or something like that. Despite being so busy, he always had time for me. He would help me with my homework, study, read my papers, try to proofread them, say, no, you should word it this way or that way, and I would argue with him. He would pick me up from soccer or pick me up from skiing. We used to water ski on the Niagara River or Lake Erie. We would go on some vacations to Lake Muskoka, which is about 2 hours north of Toronto, or south towards the Pennsylvania border. We went on trips to the Finger Lakes in the Adirondacks. We traveled to Disney World when we were in New York. We visited Gettysburg, Washington, D.C. And when I was a senior in high school, I had a couple college interviews in New York City. And we kind of incorporated those college interviews as a family vacation, saw the Statue of Liberty, World Trade Centers, Empire State Building. When I moved down here, my dad and I went on a couple trips, just the two of us, father and son. We visited the Kennedy Space Center. We went through the glass-bottom boats at Silver Springs, saw the mermaids at Weeki-Wachee. My dad was the embodiment of a perfect parent. He always tried to protect me and provide for me. He did my taxes every year. I've never done the taxes on my own. Not that I couldn't, but it was his way of giving. Even when I visited him at the hospital the night before he died, he was wondering why I drove at night to see him. He was still conscious, and he was worried if I would have to work the next day. Let's see here. He never talked to me very much about his cancer. He would always tell me, he'd give me the facts and figures, show me the lab report. I knew that kind of thing, but he always said he felt pretty good. Maybe he was a little bit tired. Let's see here. He may have been your mentor, your friend, or your relative, but he was my superhero. Thank you very much.